I'm Chief Cheryl Victorian. This is Waco PD on the beat. Whether it's crime or just getting to know the Waco Police Department, we're here to talk about things that matter most to you.
Hello, Waco, and welcome to Waco PD on the Beat. I'm Sierra Shipley, the Public Information Officer for the Waco Police Department.
And I'm Janae Draper with the Neighborhood Engagement Team.
Yes, and we have Stacy Stager here and Elizabeth Timmons with the Behavioral Health Network. Before we get into this, specific topic, this is going to be a pretty heavy episode, I'm sure, for a lot of people listening to this. So we just want to give a warning before you guys continue. We will be talking about suicide prevention and awareness. This is something that affects everyone, whether it's you directly or someone you know. This is just something that touches everyone in a very hard way. So we're here to talk about that. And Stacy and Elizabeth, I'll let them introduce themselves, but they both work at the Behavioral Health Network. And without further ado.
Well, my name is Stacy Stager, and again, thank you for having us here, Sierra and JD. I'm a social worker for Heart of Texas Behavioral Health Network. I've been there 9.5 years, and I currently work in crisis services, so I'm program manager over outpatient crisis services at our agency.
Oh, nice. Welcome.
Hi, and ditto. Thank you for having us here today. I'm Elizabeth Timmons. I am also a social worker. I'm the Director of Clinical Services for the Adult Mental Health at the Behavioral Health Network, and also the Suicide Prevention Coordinator.
Okay, wonderful. Well, yeah, again, thank you guys both for joining us here on this podcast. Like we said before, let's start out because we hear all the time about how you can get help or the phone numbers to call. And I do want to talk about that. And I want you guys just to start this episode off right off the bat about those main phone numbers or basic resources that people can go to if they need that.
Absolutely. So we do have a mobile crisis outreach team through our agency that's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have a crisis hotline number for anybody experiencing a mental health crisis, needing assistance. That number is 1-866-752-3451. And again, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Also, a very common question that we're asked is, does the police officer need to call that, or a parent or a relative? Anybody in the community can call that, whether that's a police officer, a deputy, somebody at a hospital, somebody from community. You can call if you yourself need assistance, if somebody in your family needs assistance, might be a neighbor. So we get calls from the community on a daily basis.
Is that a phone number that only services McLennan County or those surrounding counties as well?
Great question. Yes. Heart of Texas Behavioral Health Network serves 6 counties, and so that number is for all 6 counties. Our mobile crisis outreach team does serve all 6 counties, and so, like I said, if somebody calls it in, then we can talk over the phone or make a home visit to that location for that individual that's experiencing crisis.
And I mean, we're sure we're probably all aware, but just to kind of make sure, so crisis, this is someone that's like, at the time maybe experiencing suicidal thoughts, ideations, something like that, or you feel that your family member is, or just maybe just needing to reach out saying, hey, I'm not understanding, like it's covers that whole spectrum, correct, with the mobile crisis, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All of it, as well as any other mental health concerns, because as we know, especially going through the pandemic and everything, people may be experiencing triggers due to post-traumatic stress disorder. There might be psychosis, there might be mania. So we're going to try to serve anybody and everybody who's in need and in crisis. And it looks different for everyone.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I hope that by now everybody's aware, too, of the new 988 number for the Suicide Crisis Hotline. That rolled out full force in January. And so if we could make note of that, that's also a place, if you're not comfortable having somebody come out to your home or something like that, then this is also a number that you can call and talk with somebody about your suicidal thoughts and ideation. Both of those lines are not an immediate answer line, and so there may be a bit of a wait. And so what I would say that if somebody is actively suicidal, that they call 911.
Okay, but good to know.
That's very good to know. I wasn't even familiar with that, so I think that's great information.
Yes.
And I work for the police department. I probably just had not read that up yet, but no, that's awesome.
Yeah. So what are your positions at BHN? How long have you guys, how long have you been there? How long have you been working in this field, and what's kind of like your day-to-day work? a big question, huh? I know.
Yeah.
So I've been with the Behavioral Health Network for a little over 9.5 years now, and it's actually around my third career at this point in time. I've been practicing in the Waco community for over 40 years, and I've worked for Children Protective Services and was in private practice as a therapist. And now I oversee a mental health clinic that does primarily therapy in that clinic. We also have an older adult unit there. And so anybody who needs counseling can come to our clinic, and we work on a sliding scale. And so it's really great that we're able to offer that service in the community. And then just by chance, I was appointed to be the suicide prevention coordinator because people were leaving, and it was like I was on the team, and then I became that person. And I wasn't sure at first if that was something I was really interested in doing wholeheartedly, but I've really become very passionate about it, as you can imagine. And so that is something, we have a team that is working right now to implement strategies to help treat people who are experiencing suicidal ideation, then also to bring awareness and kind of normalize that conversation. So,
Absolutely.
I've also been with the agency about 9.5 years. Also, I started out in homeless services, so our PATH program, and doing outreach in the community for individuals experiencing homelessness. And then about 3 years ago, came over into crisis services, which was a very natural progression, because when you're in community all the time, you're witnessing people that are in crisis.
In crisis, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that seemed like a pretty natural, step. And so as far as what we do on a daily basis, I work with the mobile crisis outreach team, again, that they're going out in the community as well. And also our respite facility, it is a 16-bed facility for individuals who are not in imminent crisis but may need a break from their current situation, i.e. a break, a rest. And so during that time, they can stay there up to 7 days, and it provides them an environment where they can have their own room, 3 meals a day, groups, and just a place to kind of regroup and strategize for their next steps. Because a lot of us, and we see this in crisis services, we're going in a circle, and we're kind of doing the same thing over and over. And so we sometimes need that stop just to kind of get reorganized and figure out our game plan moving forward. So I work with that program, as well as we do have contract beds through the state. So we work with local psychiatric hospitals for individuals who may be in crisis but are uninsured. And so a lot of people may shy away from the idea into going into psychiatric hospitalization because of the bill. We hear that a lot from parents or just individuals that although they need the help, they're very concerned about that bill at the end. And so we work with our community providers to ensure that they get the help that they need, and we can get them the hospitalization as they need it.
Right. Wow, that's really interesting just to hear the money aspect of it. Is that something that you guys feel is a deterrent for a lot of people when it comes to finding any type of help in a crisis situation?
It's for some it is, and for some it isn't. It's dependent on with crisis services. I can say that each individual is so unique in what their crisis is. Some people, it's one of the first things they think about, because if they're already in a state of financial worry, and even if they're in crisis, they're already in that situation, they don't want to further that problem, that they're dealing with. And so that's on the forefront of their minds. Others, in that immediate crisis, they need relief, and so that may not be something that's on their mind. But that's where I feel we come in to serve in that capacity,
Right.
so that whether it's something they're thinking about now or not until they get the bill, we want to help, again, just mitigate and ease whatever we can in that current crisis situation.
That's awesome.
And I think Stacy would agree too. We want to be sure that people don't have a notion that this only happens to people who can't afford things as well. Like mental health crisis happened to everybody.
Right.
And so it doesn't have a socioeconomic, barrier or a requirement, so to speak. So, just being really careful that people understand that that mental health crisis can happen to anybody.
Absolutely.
There's no boundaries on that. Age,
Right.
race,
Right.
religion,
Exactly.
socioeconomic class. I mean, it affects everybody.
How, talking about suicide, it feels like it can be a really uncomfortable topic for a lot of people. Why is it so important for us to sit down and just open this door up and to continue to talk about it? I feel like, thankfully it's become more of a kind of a prevalent topic in our society today, but why is it important to continue to advocate for this?
So I think the more we talk about suicide, the more we can open the door for people who are experiencing suicidal ideation to be able to talk about it themselves, right? So you don't want people silently suffering and not feeling comfortable being able to talk about what their thoughts are. Because if you were with somebody and they said, I'm feeling suicidal, that can be really scary for the person saying that, but also for the person hearing that. And so we have a real goal to be able to talk about suicide like we do peanut butter and jelly. Mm-hmm. It just needs to be that common of a conversation in the sense of if somebody is experiencing that, then they should feel free to be able to talk about that and not have people, jump up and run screaming from the room because they don't know what to do, kind of thing. And I think the more we talk about it, then the more awareness there is and the less fearful people are, because it really is about an unknown and what's going to happen. And, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do, kind of thing. And so if you can help alleviate that, initial, it's okay. I don't think that you're crazy or you need to be hospitalized. Is not going to be our first response. Then I think it's helpful for people.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Do you guys feel the services that you give to the community do they fluctuate as far as how often they're needed? Do you feel like there's been an increase or a decrease in the recent months or the last year?
I think certainly we've heard more about it in the last couple of months, and I think it kind of ebbs and flows, and I don't know that there's actually a reason for that. It just seems to happen that way. But anytime that you hear about a suicide, it's really difficult. It's difficult on a community. It's difficult on families. It just doesn't affect the person who died by suicide. It affects a whole lot of other people. It's kind of like that ripple effect. If you throw a pebble in the lake, and the ripple effect that it makes is very similar to that situation.
Yeah, and I think because y'all offer help and services, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like you said, the ripple effect. It's not just the person experiencing suicide; it's everybody that might be affected by that, and y'all can help and kind of offer help with that. And I kind of want to go back to something you were just saying a second ago. Is there's a saying that I've always heard, and I actually like it, but it's okay to not be okay.
That's right.
And we're trying to I guess sometimes people put almost like a stigma on suicide and stuff, and we need to break that. And I think that's what's good about this podcast and talking about it is it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to talk about things. It's okay to sit here and be like, I was affected by a family member or somebody else. Like, what can I do to go forward? Like, and so I just kind of wanted to add that point in there that hopefully this reaches out and we can kind of get down to it, and because we're all, walking through this life together. So.
Absolutely.
I was also going to note that I think something that we hear often, and I know I experienced early on in my career as a social work, was I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Right.
And so I think a lot of us get afraid, and I've heard people say this, well, I'm not a social worker, or I'm not a this, or I'm not a that, or I'm not a trained clinician. It's like, no, and I'm sure Bethy can speak to this, that so many times, because it is so scary when you're hearing those words from a loved one or from a friend or a colleague, as far as feeling suicidal and having those thoughts, it's it can be overwhelming because you're so afraid of saying the wrong thing. What if I mess this up, or I cause something, or they do something because of what I said? And so I think that's the part of this that's so important too, is just giving people the tools to trust their instincts. When talking about suicide openly, trusting your instincts as a person, being present, and that concern of, am I going to do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing? I think that response is a big part of what we get scared about. We want to help, but we're not sure how.
Right.
What do I say? How do I help?
Right. And how should they respond, or what's the best type of advice to give someone that is finding out that their loved one, may be suicidal? And so what's something that maybe someone usually does that they probably shouldn't, and how could they help that person?
So I think the first thing is, if somebody is telling you that they're feeling suicidal, is to not shame or blame, and being careful just, to not try to placate or talk them out of that kind of thing, because in that moment, the person is, feeling very much like suicide is an answer for them. And so you want to just, the most important thing you can do is listen and provide empathy and support, and say, I'm going to stay with you because you're important to me, you matter, and so I'm going to stay here as long as I need to. And then remember not to try to fix it, right? So we're not going to try to come up with reasons why they shouldn't try to kill themselves. That is part of a process when you are doing safety planning, like to ask about reasons for living, and so that can be helpful to kind of remind people that they really are some things that are important to them in their lives that they wouldn't want to be without. But, I think people think all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I got to fix this. I got to make this right. I got to get them to stop talking about this, and which is what we really want them to do, right? And so instead, just be willing to listen and to their conversation and their concerns and worries. And that just goes so far. I can't tell you how meaningful that is to people. It's kind of like if I, passed you in the hallway and I said, hey, how you doing today? Maybe I don't really want to know that answer. But when you're talking to somebody about suicide and you say, are you thinking about killing yourself, or do you wish you could go to sleep and never wake up? I'm going to make eye contact with you. And then I might ask you again a little bit later in the conversation, just to be sure that you understand that I really want to know the answer to that question.
Right.
And if that's the case, then you know what to do in order to seek services for people and call people like MCOT who can come out and do an assessment and talk with that person and work with that person. So you don't want to leave them alone. You want to listen. You want to support. And then you want to help get them to the best resources possible, because it's not your job to fix what's going on with that person.
And I think you said it great. You said the word empathy.
Yes.
And that's really good, kind of empathy versus sympathy. It's like
Correct.
you're not feeling sorry for them. You're just being
Right.
empathetic to what they're telling you.
Yeah.
And I think that's very, very important. A lot of people, might not understand that concept, but, you're understanding and you're listening to what they're saying, and you're not actually going to where they are, but you can see how someone might feel that way. You're just being empathetic towards what they're saying. So I thought that was very...
I've never heard anybody, when somebody's asked about suicide, say, I've never thought about that before. I think I'll do that. That's never happened as far as I ever know.
Right.
And so I think we are afraid to ask because we're afraid that's what's going to happen. But people want you to ask, because if you ask, then you care. And so that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. How often do you guys see that loved one who had been affected by suicide in their family or friends, and then they start blaming themselves? Or you hear I had no idea. They always seem so happy, or they had a good life. Why would they do that? Or something along those lines. How often do you see that happen in your work?
I would be surprised if it wasn't 100% of the time.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so hard, because, it's always those people that you don't realize maybe that would. So how does that change, or how do we help those people maybe come forward and ask for help?
Before it gets to that
point, yeah.
I think also, we're talking about removing the stigma. So first of all, that has to be a part of it, because I think that survivors of loved ones who have died by suicide feel so isolated and alone. And so we need to let them know that there is help out there and it's available, and it's okay to be angry, sad, mad, all of the things. But, and it's important to talk about that. Grief happens in suicide like it does in a natural death. And so that's just a very important process that we go through as human beings, and being able to do that grieving process. And so, again, having an open door, providing a safe space for people to say whatever they need to say or do in a way that, of course, doesn't harm themselves or somebody else, but to be able to talk about how angry they are or how sad they are or whatever the case may be, and just provide that safe space and not judge that.
Do you feel like that more people are willing to come forward when they feel like they have, a mental health crisis or some type of mental health issue that they want to try and fix? Or do you feel like it's still too hard for people to come forward?
I think a lot of it just depends. A really big part is knowing the resources. Mm-hmm. There's so many times that somebody may call something in, whether it's to 911, whether they're calling the police or calling churches or loved ones. There's no wrong door, right? If somebody is having suicidal thoughts and a plan to harm themselves, we definitely want them to reach out to whomever they trust. But I think the resources that are available, that's constantly what we want to pump into the public and make sure that our community is aware of, because oftentimes they don't know that we exist until they go into crisis. And so the educational piece is huge, because I think the more that they're seeing, whether that's the 988 number, like Bethy was talking about, or our crisis number, or learning about services, I think that helps to kind of normalize mental health, and receiving mental health care. And I think that makes individuals more apt to seek it, because they're seeing it. They may have neighbors or friends that have received these services. And so a lot of times it's a referral source, where they'll say, well, I know that my neighbor went to Crisis Treatment Center and really benefited from this service, and I think I need it too. And so I think that helps normalize it too when they've heard of it, when they see it, in front of them. It's hard to reach out for help sometimes when you may be experiencing just massive, massive amounts of anxiety or depression, and you feel so alone and isolated, like Bethy was talking about, and then you don't know that the resources are available. You feel that much more hopeless, because it's like, well, I feel this way, and what are my options? So making sure that people know, like, here's some resources. And even if you don't know about it, who is in what Bethy was talking about in safety planning, who is your one trusted friend? And I think that's a really important, that source, whether that's your school, whether that's your church, whether that's your neighbor, whomever, or a family member. Have a person that you trust in the back of your mind. Keep that in mind. Because we have those trusted sources, be it family, church, community, schools. Keep that in the back of your mind, because at some point, they'll be available to you when you need them.
And it's pretty great, honestly, for therapy to go and talk to somebody who doesn't have an emotional connection to you, and you can really hear an unbiased opinion about kind of how you're doing and what you're thinking and feeling, and help you to normalize things and let you know that you're not, that there's not something significantly wrong with you because you're having these thoughts and feelings. And so I recommend therapy to everybody.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that, some people, I don't want to go to therapy. There's a weird, connotation to having a therapist or going to therapy, but it's very therapeutic.
Right. That's right.
It doesn't mean anything bad if you want to just go and talk to someone who is, trained to maybe help in certain ways to get you on a better path. And so I think if people want to go to therapy, go to therapy. Yeah. I think that's great.
Absolutely.
Just
being a human is hard.
That's it is hard. Yes.
So when we talk about crisis and trauma, it's not these people out here that go into crisis or those people over there that experience trauma. It's part of the human condition and existing in this world, because life gets hard and we have really hard seasons and hard stuff happens. And so, and I do think too, even on the therapy end, which I'm grateful you were talking about, is that I think now you have so many programs online, on the phone, so which speaks to a lot of people where they feel very comfortable using their phones, and so they may even not want to come into an office. But that's kind of in this age that we're living in, all these digital mediums and ways to do things, that I think there are all these therapy platforms online to where, and I don't want to speak to any of them because I don't want to advertise any of these. But I can say, and I think when we have people in the public eye too, like Phelps and other people that are coming up and saying, hey, I needed this therapy and I went and did this, I think it's becoming more easy, more convenient, more commonplace to connect in that arena. So I think we're seeing more of that kind of normalizing and saying, hey, I'm human. I need this because I'm human.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the line of just breaking that stigma.
Yes.
You know, it all kind of comes down to that. And, you know, talking about crisis, you know, there's no set list of, well, this is a crisis, this isn't. We are all different. We all have our own, like, you know, to me, this is a crisis. To you, that's a crisis. We all have our own list of what we feel a crisis is. And that's what we need to understand. And even when someone's reaching out to you, you might not understand that. To you, it may not be a crisis or whatnot, but to them, this is, and they are being vulnerable to open up to you about that. So that's one thing is like, hey, you know, if you know you have something, you're like, well, I think it's a crisis, but it doesn't seem like it fits this list. There is no list. If you feel it is to you, then hey, we've got resources that can come out, and there's someone that can kind of help you work through it. So
That's absolutely.
Yeah. When someone does come to you wanting help, what are those first? Regarding suicide, what are those first steps that you would help that person to, you know, feel more comfortable? And
so it all starts with the relationship, right? And so you take some time to get to know a person a little bit and a little bit about them so that you can make that connection. That's the most important thing. If that doesn't happen, then it's really hard to work going forward. And so we don't walk in the door and say, for instance, hey, it's MCOT, I hear you're suicidal, what can we do to help you? You know, MCOT's going to go in with a lot of empathy and wanting to listen and hear about what's going on. The same thing in therapy, too. People are going to come, what brings you here? Can you tell me a little bit about yourself? You know, those kinds of, it's not something that you can rush, and developing that relationship just becomes so important. And, you know, we have found before that there's folks that just met like myself individually hasn't been able to make that connection with for whatever reason, not about them, not about me, it just didn't work. So then I'll pass off to another person and say, hey, why don't you give this a try and see if you can make that connection so that people can move forward with this discussion that we need to have.
Are you guys ever out in the field and someone experiencing a crisis, more of a crisis situation, who has those suicidal thoughts? Do you guys ever go out in the field and help those individuals?
Absolutely. I mean, with the mobile, like Bethy was saying, with the mobile crisis outreach team, those are the calls we're getting, you know. Some of them, like I said earlier, they may be in the community or they may end up at the ER, you know, because they need a safe place to be while they work through it. Some of those individuals go to our crisis treatment center as well. And so, yeah, and it's going to look a little bit different when they're going into therapy and they're, you know, having that time to build the relationship versus that crisis piece, because our very first thing we go out in that relationship building is the immediate safety. So we always want to make sure they're safe and that their family's safe as well. So we always look for that first, you know, that their surroundings are safe and make sure we know exactly what's going on. And like Bethy said, but it all starts with a question of what's going on today, you know, which is a really big question because I think we assume that everybody gets asked that on a daily basis, but so many people, especially in today's day and age, everybody's going so quickly. We're bypassing each other, that just those simple things of what's going on, or you don't seem quite like yourself. Is there anything going on? A lot of times they may have not been asked that for days, weeks, months, and you might be the first person that's actually, like Bethy was saying, looking him in the eye and just asking, you know.
And not a simple question, but a question like that can really just, it could break them down.
Somebody feels seen.
Because they finally, feel seen and heard, and, someone wants to listen to me.
Yeah,
okay.
you know I exist here in the world, and you stop to talk to me that I matter enough.
Yeah.
And so,
Because we have so much, social media, technology, platforms and all like that a lot of times we lose that human connection. And sometimes it might just be what someone's looking for. And they may not actually reach out and say it, but, just kind of being like, kind of going back to what we talked to, just looking them in the eye and, how are you doing today? Or
can I interject too?
Yeah.
We also, we also look for the least restrictive environment. So the other thing that happens and that we see a lot of times is that individuals are scared to talk because you're going to throw me in the hospital. You're going to lock me up. So we hear a lot of that. Yeah. And so a lot of what we have to do is debunk that stigma as well, because when we look at movies and cinema and what people see in movies, like, no, that's not how it is.
Yeah.
It makes for a really great movie, but that's not real life, because really we're looking at the least restrictive environment always first. Right. We want to just talk with you. We want to just reach out and try to alleviate whatever that burden is that you're carrying. While we can't take that burden from you, we can be present with you in that state and work through it that way.
Absolutely.
And we always want to focus on individual care. So we're listening to you. What do you want? Do you want X, Y, and Z? Do you think these things would be helpful? Or what if things that you've tried in the past that have been helpful? Because we're the greatest historians of our own lives. We know what we need oftentimes. Sometimes not. We need people to bounce things off of. But oftentimes just saying, hey, what's worked for you in the past? What do you want right now? Mm-hmm. Just asking somebody what they want, right? And not throwing a bunch of stuff at them, but saying, hey, because human beings, and you see it in little kids, they're resilient. Yep. They're smart. So just looking at what's worked in the past and how do we get you reconnected to those natural supports, a lot of times goes a long way, and so like I said, just asking somebody what they want for their own life, because we'll get calls and people say, well, my so-and-so wants me to do this or so-and-so wants me to do this, but nobody's asked them what they wanted to do. Yeah.
So that might just help just give them control. It's like you're guiding it, but you still have that control, which sometimes people need that. They don't want to lose that.
Absolutely. And if I'm already experiencing suicidal thoughts, plans, and tension, or any other kind of crisis, I'm not going to feel the control. Mm-hmm. Maybe I did a while back, and so we're grasping for whatever. That's any of us, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It is heartbreaking when anyone dies by suicide, and when it's kids, that is something that is so hard for parents. When I was a reporter, I actually did a story about a woman who her son died by suicide when he was 13 years old because he was being bullied. And listening to her story just makes me cry every time I think about it. But it really, really hits you to the core and just shows you how people are affected by suicide, whether they know someone or someone who's just learning about a story for the first time. And gosh, advice for those parents. And I think sometimes those deaths for parents at any age really is so hard to watch their kid have to go through that. And a lot of times too is their kids, you don't think they have that capacity, right? And so what would be your advice to parents?
I think it's really important to recognize when your child's doing or acting differently than maybe they had previously. And so you need to really be aware of kind of your child's activities and how they respond to their environment and things like that. And so if you find somebody who may be sleeping more or maybe starting to give away things, or you watch on social media, I think parents should so much oversee social media because a lot of things happen there that seem really hard for especially adolescents. to deal with when people are saying things about them that are negative and things like that. So I think know your child and know kind of what their rhythm is as much as possible. And then not being afraid to ask questions, to say, I mean, I know with my kids growing up, the only way I could really have a conversation with them is if I put them in the car with me. Mm-hmm. And I kind of had this captive audience then, and I could say things. And then I learned not to ask questions that were yes/no questions. I asked questions that required some sort of an explanation. And so instead of saying, did you have a good day today, I would say, tell me one good thing about your day and one bad thing about your day, or one thing you wish you could change, and try to have those kinds of open conversations and not be afraid to have them. And not to be angry and upset and blame. And we have given you everything. Why are you still, feeling so sad? I don't understand this, kind of thing, which I think is typical, for any parent to feel or experience. And so lines of communication just from early on need to really be strong, be aware of your child's, difference in patterns of behavior, and then not being afraid to ask questions.
And I think something along with that, we're talking about parents as well, but even friends. Friends Absolutely. Might know this because you might be friends with them on social media, right. Seeing these type of patterns and stuff change, and understanding that, that friends need to, tell a parent, hey, something, so-and-so's getting picked on, or so-and-so this, right. or so-and-so that, but, stepping up and actually saying something that they're seeing as well. Because as a parent, I know with me, I didn't share everything with my parents, right. but I mainly shared it with my friends and stuff like that. So, as we kind of, again, we're stumbling through this together, so holding each other accountable. And if you see something, tell your parent, let that parent, if your kid tells you something, make sure you relay it to their parent, because they might not see these things.
Exactly.
Yeah. She has a Facebook page. It's called Kindness Matters. So just anyone looking for support in any way. I mean, she's a wonderful woman, and she actually, when he passed, she donated all of his organs. So,
and unfortunately, kids don't realize that there's so much life ahead, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that what's happening in this moment, while it's terrible and it feels terrible, this is just a moment in time, and this is going to pass, and then other good things are on the horizon. Right. And so, that finality of somebody so young, I think, really makes it even that much more challenging, especially for family members, friends, and so forth, because it just seems like such a waste, right? Mm-hmm. So, but it's very real for that person in that moment. So helping with some of that forward thinking, like, this is today, but what about 6 months from now? Right. What about 2 years from now? What about when you're grown? Kind of thing, because it just seems like this is it right here, right now. And sometimes I think too, it's like maybe it's not final. I don't really mean for it to be final, but then it is final. And so that makes it hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything that you guys, want to touch on so far that we haven't talked about? I know you guys had your notes that you brought in, but I just want to make sure that we get to what was on the forefront of your minds, but just to make sure.
No, I think all of this is great. And I think it's great being able to give out the phone numbers and to have people actually talking about this and saying that this is an important topic, and here it is. And I think just even that is huge.
Yeah. We got to break that stigma. So
absolutely. And I know, I actually want to touch on the relationship you guys have with our social worker here at the police department, D'Angela. I know you guys hear a lot about her on this podcast because she really does so much. But how has working with her, or having a social worker here at the department, helped you guys in your work, or reach out to those individuals that maybe call us but then don't reach out to you after, or we might tell them about BHN, or we might start that but they don't continue down that road?
Absolutely. I mean, I can say that definitely having a social worker on the force and doing what she's doing, she provides such great soft handoffs, and she's been really great at being able to, from our end, working in social services, we speak a certain language, right? And so working with the police department, there's another language. And so sometimes discerning one another, even though we're out trying to do the same things, right? We're trying to help and grow our community and make it a healthy place. Sometimes the vernacular we use and the way we go about it may look different. And so I think she serves to kind of bridge that gap, because I know I'm able to ask questions to her, and pose questions like, what about this? And she's like, oh, the reason that an officer may respond this way is because of this or that code.
Yeah, we speak a different language, so
for sure.
You're absolutely right. We have a different code, and not code. It's sometimes just different language that we don't even. Right. We honestly probably don't even realize that we're doing it.
And and I think that goes into each organization, each different sect of work within a community. And so I think bridging those gaps and being able to understand one another's language and limitations is been super beneficial. And also that soft handoff, because she's able to say, okay, here's where police have intervened, and then here's this person with MCOT, or here's the counseling center, And so I think that soft handoff into social services is really great, because it helps, I think, individuals in crisis to feel that they're walked through a process, as opposed to having to just figure it out or just passed off to the next person. And I think we are very diligent about not handling things in that matter, right? Because these are human beings. And so we want to handle each person with care and compassion, and not just pass them off, but to ease them into the resources, right? Absolutely. So I think that's been a really big asset.
That's great.
We're helping not have people fall through the cracks that maybe normally would have, because there hadn't been communication maybe for whatever reason between the two. And then also understanding on both sides of what we're all trying to accomplish here with the individuals. So I think that's really helpful.
Are there any upcoming, events or anything at all that BHN is working on or doing that the public can go to, or resources, anything like that?
So September is National Suicide Awareness Month, and so we have a wealth of activities that go on during that month. Also, we're doing a training that is really great for community folks called Ask. So Ask About Suicide to Save a Life. And so it's just those basic skills about how, if you're with somebody who is suicidal, here's what you do. So it's a step-by-step thing that kind of helps people become more comfortable in asking that question, and also give some of the reasonings and some of the strengths and maybe the things that are detrimental for people, to be aware of those and to be able to ask questions, and then get them to the proper resources, which is really great. And so that's a training that we offer to the community, to maybe organizations or churches or places that might be interested in having that, because we would like for everybody in lawyers' offices, doctors' offices, anywhere people go, to have that training, to be able to ask the question, because you're most likely to succeed if you have a person who knows how to ask that question at the moment. It's kind of like CPR. Mm-hmm. Your chance of success is highest when you have somebody who is trained in CPR to help you if you're having a heart attack or something else is happening. It's not when you get to the hospital. Right. It's before you get to the hospital. So that's the idea behind Ask as well.
Is that an online training, in-person training?
It's an in-person training.
It's an in-person training.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that your website? Was that where they would find the resources to go to
they
that?
Could just contact the department, and they'll get them in touch with the right people in order to make that training available to folks.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That kind of, it sounds like it could go. I'm going to change the last question up. But what is something that you guys hope for or wish for in the future regarding suicide awareness and prevention?
So I'm with y'all. Let's remove the stigma, and let's start having open, honest conversations about suicide. It starts with changing our language and how we talk about it, and being able to acknowledge that suicide does happen, and that we can prevent that by asking the question to whoever the person is that we're with, and for people to just be excited about, having some knowledge that they can use to help another individual. So.
I'm with Bethy on that. I think that goes for all of us. We want to see our community as healthy as possible. We want to see our families as healthy as possible. And I think the fear part, the fear of, I know that was really big for me, years ago when I started. The fear of saying the wrong thing, the fear of making a situation worse. And so I think that brings me joy to know that you can get, even if you feel that way now, that you're afraid and you don't know what to say or how to say it, or you're afraid of messing up, that there are trainings, there are skills, and just simply being open and honest and compassionate goes a long way. And so ultimately, that's a big piece that I'd like to see too, is that fear to dissipate in people, and for them to, like Bethy was saying, talking about it like peanut butter and jelly, just being able to ask straight up. And I think as we start to see our community gain that strength in asking those questions, asking the hard questions, I think it'll empower future generations, because when parents or loved ones ask these questions, children are watching, they're hearing that, and hopefully that goes through generation to generation to generation.
Right. Well, instead of just tiptoeing around the question,
Yes.
or tiptoeing around, well, I don't really want to come out right and ask you, but can you give me some hints as far as, and then the two are kind of playing a game, and it doesn't really go anywhere, and you kind of walk away with more questions, and maybe that person, they didn't really ask me, or they didn't ask the right thing. Right. So they, maybe they care about me, but I don't think they do, because it didn't seem like they did. But just coming out and asking, I guess that's just,
which is really important. Makes it even more important to ask that question directly. Yes. Like, you don't want to beat around the bush and say, I need to ask you something kind of hard, but not really sure how. Instead, just say, do you have thoughts of killing yourself? Do you want to go to sleep and never wake up? And being very direct with those kinds of statements. And then by all means, if you're in a situation and you don't feel like you can ask the question for whatever reason, find somebody who can.
Sure.
And you always have to trust your gut instinct, right? So if you're thinking, should I or should I not ask this question, you probably should, because you wouldn't have thought of it if you didn't think there was a reason to ask it. And so just follow your gut instincts. And like I said, and if you don't feel like you can ask, then just find somebody who can ask that question for you. And no harm, no foul. This is a no blame culture that we want to develop here. We don't want people feeling bad because they didn't maybe say the right thing or do the right thing, because this is not something that we have that kind of control over. And so we want people to know that just whatever you do is going to be helpful, and especially when you can ask that question or get somebody to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both very much for joining us on this podcast today. One just quick thing before we wrap it up: 988 is a phone number that you guys can call when you are in a situation. Of course, 911 when you're in that immediate crisis, right? And then I'll let you guys give that BHN phone number one more time as well.
Yes, that's our 24-hour crisis line. It's 1-866-752-3451.
Wonderful.
And then I want to add something to that. What's the number they can call? Because I think that ASK training that y'all are talking about would be very important. What's the number you said that they can call to kind of maybe if they want to get more information on that? Would it be the same number, or is it a different number?
It's 254-752-3451.
Well, thank you, Stacy, and thank you, Elizabeth, for joining us here on Waco PD on the Beat. I'm Sarah Shipley, the Public Information Officer.
And I'm Janae Draper with the Neighborhood Engagement Team.
And we hope you have a great day, Waco. Thank you.
Bye, Waco.
Waco PD on the Beat. The heartbeat serving